Great. Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another Renegade Con interview. My name is Chris Whiphand. I'm your host, and I am here today with the Oni. What's your actual title, Steve? I don't want to say president, founder, and end all be all because I know you share those duties. But what would you actually say your title is?
I mean, we go with head of games. I think on org paperwork, it's VP of games or something,
There you go.
something
Okay.
more corporate.
But you are definitely half of the brainchild that kind of formed Oni with Charlie Chu back in the day. Am I correct?
Yeah, yeah. Charlie Chu and I got together. He's the film and entertainment person for Oni.
Okay.
So he and I we work together on a bunch of stuff. But he heads up film and TV stuff, and I head up the game stuff. And he and I do a lot of biz dev stuff together, where we
Awesome.
just kind of do crazy things that nobody else has time to do with.
Awesome. So we'll deep dive that a little bit later, but let's kind of wind the clock back because those of you who may know Steve already, you may know some of this information, sure, but a lot of this I'm curious about. So we're gonna dive deep and see, how did you get into board gaming? What is your origin story of board gaming?
Oh, my origin story. I mean, I grew up in a household that played games, right? So my extended family, my parents, everybody was big card players. So I played probably every conceivable variation of games that you can play with a standard deck of playing cards, right? That was kind of the household thing. And then we played things like Scrabble and other stuff. And then probably as I got into, later elementary school, I discovered things that were a little more interesting to me, like Risk and Axis and Allies, and
Okay.
then the older brother of a friend taught us Dungeons and Dragons, and then it was a deep dive from there, right? But yeah, I mean, a family of gamers. I played chess with my dad growing up, so
Okay.
lots of different gaming experiences early on.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So then, what made you decide that you love games so much? Was there an in between period between that younger Steve to the Steve who ended up opening a whole board game store?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I went to, I played sports and all that kind of crazy stuff in high school, played D&D and some stuff on the side, but was pretty busy, went through
Hmm.
college, got an engineering job, was an engineer for 7 or 8 years. Met a really good friend of mine, Jeff Abramson, playing Magic at a comic shop in out here in Portland, Oregon, and that comic shop at some point was going to close and go away. And we jokingly made a comment about, oh, we should just open a store so that we'd have a place to play. And one thing led to another. We had a few lunches, we talked about stuff, and we were like, yeah, sure, let's try this. And there was kind of a gentleman's agreement on how much money we were each willing to lose. And we threw that money in and started a game store. And we were fortunate to start our store in the late 90s.
Oh wow.
Board games were kind of just coming on in the US in a new and exciting way with lots of imports from Germany and stuff like that. So we imported a lot of games in the early years, and then stopped that probably 5 years in or so, just because so many games were coming over in English at that point that we didn't need to do importing anymore. But and we were fortunate. We opened in '98. Pokemon hit within that next year, and our store took off like crazy because it was the best advertising campaign that we could. I mean, we could never have done on our own. So we had customers that found us through Pokemon that became our customers for the next 20 plus years.
Wow. So kind of like they say magic builds a store. In your case, it was Pokemon built that store.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff and I were both big Magic players. That's how we met, right? But so
Right.
we started off with Magic and Warhammer and board games, and then, but when Pokemon hit, it was just such an influx of customers, and getting to interact with a whole new generation of kids and teaching people how to play games, and so it was a really vibrant time to be in the industry, and it was exciting, right? And it gave us the chance to
Hmm.
go from, oh, I don't know if this store will make money, to, oh, well, like this could actually work, right? We're getting a lot of people through the door that we never expected. So we just poured all the Pokemon money back into our store for the first like 3 years,
Right.
and then kind of turned it into the store that we wanted it to be by really focusing more on board games and that kind of stuff.
So what would you say was, I mean, that sounds very fortuitous in timing, and that's wonderful. What was probably like the hardest hurdle to kind of getting started? Because trust me, you're not the first person to say sitting in a store, I could do this. I could probably do this better. Like I could change something. I could do this.
Sure,
What might you
sure.
have for them?
I mean, I think the big thing for us is that, despite the fact that neither Jeff nor myself had ever worked a retail job in our lives,
Ooh.
I kind of I grew up in rural Midwest, right? I mean, I didn't work retail, like, I did other things. um, but yeah, I mean, I think the biggest deal was Jeff and I were both engineers. So what happened with us is that we just kind of tackled it like a problem, right? And we
Okay.
developed a lot of processes and systems to like run a store, right, as a business, right, and make sure that that little business had systems in place to make it work, as opposed to just being this kind of passion project. Oh, we love games, and not thinking about it. I mean, we really worked on. It's like, how much money can we actually pull out? And it's like, we want to churn, we want the business to grow and be successful. So we put most of the money back in early, and developed systems. And I think staff was key. Hiring,
Sure.
I mean, hiring a few key staff members early. I mean, we hired our first employee who, with the exception of a 1 year absence, was with us for 22 years up until we sold the
Wow.
store this summer, and is still managing that store now for the new owner.
Wow.
So I mean, with call it luck. I mean, more than anything, right? That we found an employee early on that was great. Um, uh, and then we had good employees. I think through the course of the business, it had its ups and downs with employees, but I think that's the key: developing systems for the business, and then finding good employees that are willing to kind of follow those guidelines, but give them enough freedom to do their thing as well and develop relationships with their customers and things like that. I think that's the key though. But you have to develop systems to run a business.
Right. And I would counter your point about getting lucky with finding good employees. I come off of 30 years of running restaurants and staffing, serving staff, and host staff, and the whole routine. If you want to talk about turnover in a business, it's retail and restaurants. And one thing I learned in all that time is you will get the same employees that you model or that you already have. So good decisions and being good yourself and running your store your way is how you get good employees. So they're just a mirror of you. So that's what I was always
That's
taught.
I like that. It's a nice compliment. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I do think that we did try to work hard and model what we wanted and practice what we preached, so to speak.
Right.
I mean, but it is a roller coaster of staffing, right? I mean, it's not with the exception of even a big successful store, with the exception of maybe a management position and a buyer position, there's not a lot of upward growth opportunities.
Right.
There have to be a lot of people who are just kind of sales floor people and work the store. So you're always going to have, just like a restaurant, you're going to have a high degree of turnover, which is why I think the systems are so important, right?
Yeah.
To make sure that you can train people and get people rolling with the tool sets they need to be successful.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's tough.
And then you turn around and like any successful business owner, you strive to be able to package that so that you can sell it and move on to your next thing. So that's a win, right? Like
Yeah, it was great. I was super excited. I mean, myself, Jeff, and my wife, who's a partner in our business as well. Like, we talked a lot over the last couple of years about, oh, what's the exit strategy?
mhm.
And our thought was maybe in the next 3 to 5 years we would try to sell that retail business. Um, we were fortunate enough to have a qualified buyer with a vision that we thought was worthwhile, and not going to be detrimental to our current employees and things like that, come along last year and start having some discussions with us. And then we came to an agreement in February. Then the world changed. We put the deal on hold for a little bit, and then it closed on the same terms that we come up with in February and July.
Awesome.
So yeah, super excited. I mean, the store's still running. The staff is all still there. I think it's a slight improvement for him, for my staff, because the current owner will offer a few more benefits because his plan is to expand and have a chain of stores. He already owns another big store in Portland, Guardian Games, as well.
Awesome.
So yeah, I think it'll be great. I think it's a good way for us to get out. It's a good way for the story to go forward. So it's nice to see it. And us. The more we looked at it, like waiting forever. I didn't want to own a store until I died.
Right.
I loved owning a store. It's probably one of the most. I don't know. It's one of the most loved things I've ever done. Creating that store and the community that store became from scratch was fantastic. So yeah, it was great. But I'm okay that it's gone. It's a good place for me to be. I can focus on other things and make games and stuff, which I love to do as well.
So speaking of, sounds like a great time to talk about how the heck did, Oni go from just kind of being if I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, but just like a book publisher and things like that, into making games and then getting into some of these other properties that they're starting to branch out into?
I think it's just the classic case of, if you look at any business, you start to think of, maybe a little more diversity is good for the business, right? It's like they published mostly graphic novels, books, and comic books, right?
Right.
So Oni's got a 20 plus year history at this point as well, as being kind of this kind of cool, quirky indie comic publisher where everything is creator owned. So we have very strong relationships with the people who both write and illustrate the books that we do. Some of that applies to Charlie Chu's realm of things as well, where he helps some of those things maybe become more than just a book, maybe get into film and TV and things like that as well. And I think that games are just a kind of vibrant, culturally adjacent section of the market. I think a lot of people who are into comics and games at the same time, so that's kind of a nice fit. And the game market's been growing, and there's just a lot of opportunities in that area as well, right? So it just felt like a good fit. A lot of our graphic design skill sets that we have for our design team come into play. So we're already used to making pretty books, so making some pretty games is also not that big of a stretch.
Right.
I think there's a lot of, overlapping skills that help us, as a company bring those things to life.
Awesome. So what was kind of the first game out of the gates that kind of made you go, this is going to work. This is a great marriage. These things are going to come together nicely.
Yeah, it was interesting. I had done a game with Renegade as a designer, Dicey Goblins, back a few years with my friend Tyler Tinsley and I had worked on and designed, and we published that. And because of that, I was at a dinner hosted by Renegade at Gen Con, and randomly Charlie Chu and I sat next to each other at this dinner. And then, we kind of hit it off and we were chatting, and then we realized we actually both lived in Portland, and so it was kind of I realized he worked for Oni. He realized that I'd owned Rainy Day Games, which he had been to in the past. So we kind of hit it off, and we just started talking about, it's like, oh, you guys should do some other stuff. They had done one Scott Pilgrim game at the time. And I was like, there's all kinds of stuff you guys could do with your library. And Charlie and I just kind of got excited about talking about that stuff. And I settled in on T-Dragons because Charlie just said, I don't care, just do something, like pick whatever you want. And so Tyler and I went off and started working on a T-Dragon game. And at this point, it was just kind of, I'll just design a game for you guys and that'll be the end of it. But what happened is that, working with the team at Oni and stuff, it's like, I really liked the people. We worked really well together. Charlie got super excited. James, who's the president and publisher at Oni, got super excited about things. And we just decided to try to figure out a way to make it a real thing and do more with it going forward. And so we decided to form Oni Games under that Oni umbrella. And here we are, like making cool stuff. So.
Do you get now when it comes to Oni properties, do you get to just like look through the toy box and say That would be good. That would be good. Or is it kind of more collaborative and everybody kind of pitches and kind of comes back and forth? How does that work?
It's kind of, I mean, it's a little bit collaborative. I mean, the reality is that I just kind of have carte blanche to do what I want to do, which is awesome. Um,
It's not bad.
so it's nice, right? There's a lot of discussions about maybe various properties within Oni that are seeing some interest on other fronts. So maybe there's some interest from Hollywood or
Okay.
whatever on a certain product that we have or something. So that might be something we target for a future release that we're thinking about. We've also done some. We've got a new game coming out in September. So it'll be out by the time this airs, right? Gudetama, which is a
Right.
licensed product with Sanrio. So Oni does comics based on that property, and so it's like it makes sense since we're already working with that licensor to dive in and do a game as well. We'll be doing that for another property as well with the same partnership. So that'll be out next year. Um,
There,
but
there's
yeah, so
not
I mean, it's
there's not too many, and there's so many at the exact same time to choose from with them.
it's it's crazy. I mean, Oni has like I said, a 20-year library, right? I
Right.
mean, so I could make games off their properties forever, right, and not run out of topics,
Sure.
right, or subject matter. So for us, the hardest thing is just figuring out what we want to do next, because we also don't want to be a company that makes 15, 20 games a year and
Hmm.
not have any of them mean something, right? So we would like to try to focus in on do a few games that we feel really represent the property to the fan base in a way that respects everything that's been done before,
Right.
right? So we were going to bring new fans in, but we want everybody that loves book X to come back and say, "Oh, that game was great because it was very true to that book that I loved."
Right.
So we want to make sure that we give those things the attention they deserve.
It kind of allows for an extension and an interaction of a property, right? It allows you to extend its reach and maybe give people more of what they love, but at the same
Yes.
time allows them to play around with it too. So,
Yeah, and it's really fun too because we've got relationships with the creators of the original
mhm.
books, right? So if we want to have, a little bit of new exciting artwork or something like that, like the contacts are already there, and it's really exciting and fresh for those creators as well to get to work in an area that's a little different than,
Right.
drawing a comic book or whatever it is they're used to. So getting a little more feedback, a little more involved in how the game expands their existing world a little bit and things like that is really fun to work with.
So when you have a game, when you have Tea Dragon Society, for instance, and we had an interview with Katie at Gen Con, and she was delightful as all get out. A big surprise there. Um,
Yeah.
but how do you go about trying to kind of develop something within those constraints? Because it's not like you're developing a game and then saying, hey, this would be really cool with this theme and this mechanic makes sense this way. You're kind of building from the other end of it. And how is that different and how does that work for you?
I think it's very different, right? I mean, as an engineer, for my training, right, I'm very kind of system oriented. So for
Hmm.
me, it's very natural to design like a bunch of cool mechanics, right? And then say, "Oh, I wonder what I could do with this weird thing I've made." So that to me is kind of maybe my baseline default method.
Right.
So working with the Oni properties has been a really cool challenge for me to design from the completely opposite end of the spectrum, right? Where it's like, okay, this is kind of the feel that we want to evoke from the game. We want
Hmm.
the game to be very true to the spirit of this property, and that their fans will recognize it and make sure that we're living within that world and not doing some crazy complicated thing in some cute simple setting.
Right. Right.
So matching, making sure that we marry appropriate mechanics
Hmm.
with the property, right? So it was super fun to work on the first Tea Dragon game. I mean, Tyler and I spent a bunch of time, iterating and messing around before we showed anything to anyone, because I mean, our first couple of designs were either very flat and not engaging or overly complicated, right?
Yeah.
So it did take a while to kind of hone in on, it's like, oh, this is where we want to be. This is the sweet spot, right? It's not too hard, but there's some interesting stuff going on. So it's definitely a different approach. I really enjoy it now that I've done a few games this way,
Hmm.
with the more thematic elements first and story and feel, and trying to evoke that experience that you desire. So, this is the fan base. This is the type of people we expect to play.
Right.
This is the type of game that we think they'll enjoy, right? And trying to hit that target market is really fun, and it's very helpful because it really puts a nice box around your design parameters.
Yeah, I would think
You
it
know,
really does. You're not just
yeah,
designing saying, okay, now who's this game for? You're like, this is who the
yeah,
game's for. So you have something to
yep,
guide a lot of your, your decision
yeah,
making.
yeah. So like we just, Autumn Harvest, the next game will be out in October. And so that one was fantastic because we had a very tight box within to work because we already had one game and we wanted it to be
Right.
compatible and work together, but also be a standalone product, right? So it was really fun, and I mean, I think we're exceptionally proud of that game. I think fans are going to really like it, and I think gamers are going to be like, oh, this is exactly what we wanted without being too complicated for our non-gamer friends.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
So on the plus side, if you're watching this live during the convention, you can go demo T Dragon Society. We do have it out. Gudetama is in the open play, but I'll be honest with you, it's very very quick to pick up, and I think you could sit down with a bunch of friends real quick and play it on Tabletopia this weekend because. Gudetama is a little. I had no idea, Steve, what Gudetama was. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't know anything until I literally watched the Toys That Made Us, and I actually
Okay.
just watched the Hello Kitty one, which happens to have the licensors on there, and then all
Yep.
of a sudden it pops up, and I go, oh wait a second, I know that, and it just kind of went ding, light bulb. Now it all came together. So now I understand what, because there's just like two quick mentions right at the end of the show about, finding the next kawaii thing. And that, the laziest egg is just amazingly cute and awesome. So it just, what was I mean, describe the game a little bit. And I think where the mechanics come from and came from and were born from will kind of make a lot of sense when you understand the theme a little bit better.
Yeah. So I mean, so Gudetama, that game was designed by myself and Ben Eisner, who are both Oni employees, right? So we did that one in house, just the two of us, kind of messing around before COVID hit, when we could work together in the office. So that's a game that we looked at that property, and it's not like there's um, a real depth of story to that character, right?
Right.
It's not this big story driven IP. It's essentially a cuteness driven IP, right?
Yeah.
It's really cute. The character does like really fun, simple meme like things, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
not, it's great. Like, it has a huge fan base, and it's really, so we wanted to tap into that fan base and design a game that was simple and easy to play, right? Just kind of a quick thing, cute art. Here we go. Let's play a quick game, right? So
Yeah.
we tried a bunch of different concepts and things like that. And, one of the things we settled on was there's kind of an old, I think mostly Northern European genre of games called Cucumber, and
Okay.
they're all based on this premise of, you play this trick taking game, and everything comes down to the final trick, right? The final trick is really
Okay.
all that matters. And that whole series of games, and there's not a million, but a whole lot of variants, and in weird ways, this was played with a traditional deck of cards over the years, over the last several centuries in Northern Europe mostly. And so we looked at that game, and it's like, well, I think we could do something like that would be intuitive and quick to pick up. And it's just a very simple trick taking game. High card wins, they lead next. Um, uh, but what matters is that you don't want to take the final trick, right? And the whole genesis of Gudetama is that Gudetama character came from a contest in Japan that Gudetama actually did not win. Um, so Gudetama
Kind of
was
fits
the
the theme
runner-up.
even more.
So when we locked in on that concept, it's like it's perfect for this character because this character actually didn't win, but ended up being the big winner, because it was the biggest. In the end, it was the biggest fan prize winner overall, even though that it didn't win the vote, right?
Right.
So it was a very interesting situation. So in the game, basically, you play these tricks, and when it's your turn to play a card in a trick, you have to either play a card equal to or higher than the current highest card in the trick, or you simply have to play your lowest card. So if people play a bunch of high cards and drain you of your really low cards, you're going to be in trouble when it gets to that last trick. So it's all about kind of managing your hand and figuring out what card you think might work and get you through on that final trick. Because it doesn't matter how bad your card is, as long as somebody has one that's just a little bit worse than yours, and you're going to be okay. So yeah, it's super fun. The game is fast. I mean, it's like a 15-minute play. It's
Right.
got cute art. The feedback has been amazing. We did a whole bunch of playing during Gen Con online and things like that, and everybody wants to stop and take extra time to read the little card quotes and look at the pictures. So I mean, that's kind of what we were going for, right? So it's
Yep.
really cute. It's fast. It's simple. Plays up to 7 players, which is
Yeah.
very chaotic, and is crazy good as a 2-player game. Like this was the hit at lunchtime in the office. Everybody was playing head-to-head Gudetama.
Which
and
is
trying
amazing for a trick-taking game that it can play too, because usually they don't, because it's just you do a
It's
thing, they do a thing.
it's very strange. Like I mean, at the beginning, I wasn't even thinking it was going to be a 2-player game, and then in playtesting, Ben and I were playing a lot 2-player, and we were just like, "Oh, this is really good. Like we like it. Like it's fun 2-player." And we started showing to people at lunch, and then everybody was like, "Hey, do you have another deck?" Right? It's like, well, I thought, well, it's like, no, we want to square off 2-player, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah.
Awesome.
So it was really fun.
So we have a tournament all weekend long going on around Gudetama, and the preliminary rounds are going to be Saturday, and the finals are going to be Sunday, and we're actually going to televise the finals live Sunday night. But we're gonna offer some commentary, and you might hear Steve give some commentary during that event. I think that could be
I
fun.
would. I'm excited about that event. And I'm hoping to maybe I can get some of the better players to maybe challenge Ben and myself before
Yeah,
the end of the weekend. I
there
think
you
it'd be
go.
fun.
So
We've played a lot.
yeah, exactly. And it's I just think it's fun, it's light, and it's completely adorable. I can totally see somebody buying 2 versions and framing one, because they're the way I like to describe it is they're one panel comic strips. They are like literally like just one shot cute little individual things that they slow down gameplay because you have to look at them all. Absolutely.
It's yeah. My assumption is if you've played a lot, you'll start to just play. But the first few games, people are always enchanted with the art, so it's great. Our graphic
Absolutely.
design team came through once again. The artist and the graphic design team are fantastic.
Yeah,
They
and
made
it's
Ben and I look really good.
so. Is there anything on the near horizon that you can talk about yet that's beyond like T Dragon or anything like that you kind of have in the works, or at least mechanics or mechanisms that you might find interesting to play with right now?
I mean, I've done a fair amount of stuff with deck building games in the past. I worked on the Trains game with AEG and did the full design of the
Okay.
Trains Rising Sun game and some other stuff. I'm sure at some point that will produce something in that genre. No promises as to when, but yeah, I'm sure there'll be something along those lines at some point.
Cool.
It's a genre that like my daughter loved, so like I played probably every deck building game for like a 10-year stretch of the deck builders just because it was something that she always enjoyed.
Right.
So I was always happy to bring a new one home and play with my kid. Um, uh, so that's an area we'll probably go at some point.
Cool.
There's a bunch of stuff. Right now we're doing a lot of card games. I'll say that we will be producing you know, if people are familiar with the term ladder card game, where you're trying to
Tissue's
get
a
rid of your hand
ladder.
of cards.
Yep.
Tissue's a ladder card game, right?
Yep.
You know, like Great Dalmuti's a ladder card game. We'll definitely
Mm-hmm.
have one of those coming out for another licensed property. So
Oh, cool.
something along that genre that'll have a little twist that hopefully makes it fun for people.
Now, do you find like card games are great because they kind of, you know, we think of Oni as like the comic book and the publisher and the graphic, and I feel like you get so much bang for the buck with a deck of cards versus other things. Do you find that that's maybe why you gravitate towards them? They just kind of really showcase everything.
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, that was certainly for us in the first few years, that was a target for us, right? We wanted to
Mm.
do things that allowed us to show off art and graphic design, right? But also, you know, as a newer company to the game space, you know, we didn't want to start out with $60 board games.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of nice to, you know, build a little bit of a fan base and build some support first.
Sure.
And I think that also with the fact that a lot of our stuff is based on existing properties, you know, and not necessarily uh, hardcore gamers are fans of those properties at the moment, right? We
Hmm.
wanted to take a chance and make sure that all of the hardcore fans of the books were happy. So giving them, you know, some kind of easier, lighter fare card games was a really good way to get them into the gaming hobby. You know,
Sure.
for us to pull those book fans into the gaming hobby, I think was an important thing for us to do. And I think gamers are always looking for light, fun games as well to use as fillers and things like that. So and you know, to introduce their friends that are not gamers already.
Yeah.
And certainly we have, you know, Ben and I are big game players, right? I mean, we would love to do some big epic things, and we've got some properties that would fit really well for some big epic games. So we've got some designs to do some stuff like that in the future. But I think it'll be a slow roll for us to, you know, we want to do those things right, and we're not going to rush something to market just to put a $60 box on the table.
Right.
Um, uh,
Only to have it
yeah, so we'll
disappear right away.
yeah, you
Want
know,
something
and
to
then
stick.
we have done, you know, and we have done, you know, we did just finish up in partnership with Renegade a big Scott Pilgrim miniatures game, right? So
Right.
that's a big project that we were involved with, but we didn't do that design work in house at Oni, right? That was a thing that Renegade did the design, you know, championing the design framework on, and we helped on some other things, but
Cool.
yeah, so it's, you know, it's not like we're completely uninvolved and don't have the appetite for bigger games. But for the short term, we're doing stuff that really lets us kind of accentuate and highlight the things that we're already good at. And card
Makes
games are
sense.
perfect. You know, like you said, it gives us a palette for art and graphics and all kinds of other stuff without having to, you know, do a whole big, massive undertaking. That, quite frankly, I think if we did a $60 board game for some of the books that we've done games on already, you know, I don't know that anybody wants a giant board game for Gudetama.
No. No. I think that's exactly what you want from it is, you know, that size, that portability, that little surprise whip it out of the bag right at the end of the night before everybody's just about to go home, and you know a quick game turns into 5 games in a row because
Yeah,
you just can't stop playing it, and that's where I think it hits.
that's our hope, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's my dream scenario is to make that game that people are like reluctantly play as gamers and then can't put down.
Yes, yes, there's something to be said for that game. So you kind of mentioned the relationship with Renegade. So how does, you know, how did that relationship evolve, and what does it look like?
I mean, that relationship is like it's so good that like I mean it's almost a dream, right? I mean, so it's done. You know, one thing that it did for us as a new entity on the gaming front, right, is it allowed us to become, you know, essentially just a design studio, right? So
Okay.
we deliver the relationship between us and Renegade is typically we deliver Renegade a finished product, right? You know, complete game, all the graphics, all the assets, the box, everything's finished and ready, and we hand over final files to Renegade, right? But the beauty of that arrangement is that like they get some great products, and to add to their catalog, and we also didn't have to hire 5 or 6 more employees to manage all of that back end responsibility, right? So we're not
Right.
dealing with the factories overseas. We don't have shipping and logistics to deal with and all that stuff. Renegade already has relationships with all of the hobby game distributors that we would need. They've got relationships across the board with sales and marketing and things like that as well. Certainly, we have sales and marketing on the Oni side as well, but it's mostly focused on our book publishing division.
Right.
So we can help amplify the signal and do some things cross promotion wise that are great. But it just means that we didn't have to fully staff up a game company, and so this kind of partnership with Renegade is perfect. And Scott and I have known each other for 20 plus years at this point.
Wow.
So Scott, who owns and runs Renegade, we met way back when I had, in the early years of my retail business, and Scott was still working for Decipher. I think is probably the first time he and I met. And he was on a big tour for Decipher visiting game stores. And one of the stores he chose to come visit was mine. Right. So that was kind of, I think, one of the first. We may have met at a trade show or something before that.
Right.
But that was probably the first time that we had, meaningful conversation that wasn't just, passing industry professionals, right? So we kind of got to know each other a little better. And we've been friends throughout the years. And I think that friendship has just kind of grown over time, right? The industry is small, and you tend to find people that you have similarities and share kind of the vision with and things like that. And Scott and I
Right.
really work well together. And like, I love Scott's team. I mean, I love working with Sarah and Leisha and other people on the back end that are just fantastic. Dan and everybody's just great. It's such a great team, right? It's a great team, right? So, and being able to work, and I've known Sarah for a long time as well. Sarah actually runs a game store that wasn't there when I went to college, but she runs a game store in the little town in Montana where I went to college. So Sarah and I have a lot of different little, small overlapping data points that have let us grow closer over the years. And so it's been great working with the whole team. Yeah, it's really nice. And to think that it all, it just all kind of happened. Like, it's not like we worked really hard to get to this place.
Just kind of everything just kind of lined up to go that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. It's been a really, I think it's a good partnership for all sides.
Sure.
I think we've got big, cool stuff coming. So I get to work with you now too, which is awesome.
It's a lot of fun. I manage events, and it's I had to make my own because we need to have events. So
yeah, I've been impressed. Like, I think that one of the things that I love about the Renegade staff is that the Renegade staff is willing to change and adapt. And like, just looking at 2020 is a great example of how creative you guys have been. Just, it's like, oh, well, I guess we're going to do our thing. Like, what thing are we going to do? We're going to do our own thing.
we're going to make it up, and we're going to do it. So, and we're not going to only do it once. We're going to do it twice, because
why not? If you're going to learn to do it.
Well, it's funny. Renegade used to be this little company that I could own everything that they made, because that's the way it started out. Like, everything they put out was great. Like, Lanterns was wonderful. Just all those early games that, I remember buying the Christmas box that came with 5 promos, and I'm like, I get to use all 5. No problem. I got them. Yeah. So it was, it's very cool to have that. And then all of a sudden, like, fast forward a few years, yes, I'm playing games in the business, and I come to work for them, and I look at the catalog, and I'm like, oh goodness, I am so far behind now. I do not have everything these days, because it's just that we put out so much that it's important to try and like show people what that's all about. And highlighting, like, we're highlighting Oni this weekend because there's so much good stuff that you guys do that we want to make sure everybody knows about it. So, test drive the games, have some fun, and check them out. Highly encourage that. So
I really appreciate it. It's great. This is a great show.
I totally love it. I look forward to doing this show each time. So there's one more thing that you kind of are known for that I kind of like to shine a spotlight on, because I think it's also important, and you kind of touched on it a little earlier, and I see the red box sitting in the corner there. You also are one of the brains behind Free RPG Day. Am I correct with that?
Yeah, myself and three other industry veterans purchased Free RPG Day from
Hmm.
Aldo Gielzi, who was the original founder back in 2013.
Okay.
Um, uh, and and Aldo had just he'd been looking for the last couple of years for someone or a group of people to maybe take it over, because he still loved it, but he felt like he had kind of lost his oomph and motivation to make it better than it is now, than it
Yeah.
was, right? I mean, he'd done a lot with it, and then he just kind of is like, I realize I'm tired. Like, he was a one man show, and it was just it's not an overwhelming amount of work, but it's a lot of work,
Yeah.
and so we got together with him and we purchased Free RPG Day from him in spring of 2019. So we rolled through 2019 kind of as it stood, as he had always run it, because we kind of took over halfway, and then
Hmm.
2020 we took over and ran the whole thing from start to finish. And you know, an interesting year to run it start to finish for the first time.
Probably
But we
also
learned a
one of the
lot.
most necessary years for it, if I would have to
Yeah,
say, because
yeah. I feel like the feedback we got from retail was really strong this year. We felt like we delivered the best product. The kit of stuff was as good or better than it had ever been. Retail stores were very, very happy with that. I think fans were happy. I think the only complaints we saw from fans were, they didn't have some fans didn't have a store close to them. And I mean,
gotcha.
it's 2020, so I mean that was maybe the case for more than it would have been otherwise. But we sold 40% more kits than had ever been sold before.
Wow.
So we grew a lot in 2020. So there were a lot of stores participating, and we apologize to those who weren't able to get what they wanted because their local store didn't. But hopefully next year they will, and we'll grow the event again. You know, uh, yeah, but it's a great event for people who aren't familiar with what it is. It's essentially the chance for retailers to have an all day celebration for role playing games, which tend to get, you know, I don't want to say neglected, but maybe not highlighted to the same level as maybe collectible card games or miniature games or even board games in stores.
Hmm.
Some of those games have a lot of events, whereas role playing games often, are a little more of the, people buy the stuff and take it home and play with their personal group.
Right.
So I think that they don't get the shining moments in stores always that the other games do. So it's just an opportunity for those stores to bring in exclusive content for games, and it's an assortment of publishers. Renegade actually had 3 different items in the kit this year, right? They had something for kids on brooms, they had an overlight piece, and they also had Junior Braves, which is an RPG that Oni did. um, uh, and so it's just an opportunity to get all the fans to come by the store. This year was strange in that most stores did not run events like normal.
Right.
Normally, it's a day where stores run a lot of in-store events and things like that. This year, that was not the case for most stores. But I think it was still a great opportunity to kind of celebrate RPGs and remind everyone that they're still out there, and that you can still come get cool books to read, and you can figure out a way to play online with your friends or whatever. RPGs do tend to work pretty well online. We had a partnership with Roll20 this year for the first time ever. So to give people an opportunity to
Yeah.
try out that. I mean, it's for me as a player, being able to buy a book. I love books. I like a physical book in my hand. I don't think
Right.
that will ever change for me. That may not be the case for some people who are more excited about digital. I don't mind. I like owning a digital copy. They're great for
Yeah.
searching,
It's
but I
helpful.
love I love to I love to read a book, right?
Yeah.
So I'm never going to abandon my local store for my RPG books, but knowing that there's an opportunity for me to still play those games in an online setting when we're kind of all trapped in our homes is a really nice option.
Right.
So yeah, so I think it was great. It was exciting to see the event flourish despite all that 2020 was. We had some delays. We pushed it out, so it was later in the year than it had ever been before. But it still worked. It worked great. And I think it was still a good rallying cry for that community to kind of, even if they couldn't gather in the normal way, it was still a rallying cry for them to kind of gather and come visit their local retailer,
Right.
grab a cool thing that they can't get elsewhere, and kind of remind them that, hey, the hobby is still there if you want to engage in it, even if you're stuck at home.
It's definitely a great way to kind of, you're that person who maybe played, like I used to play role-playing games when I was a kid, or I owned a bunch, but I don't know if I played as many. I think we only ever played Top Secret a couple times, and that was about it. But, now to find a group and be able to play digitally, I was able to do that during lockdown. I don't think I would have been able to do that other times because everybody's too busy, but it was kind of nice that everybody kind of slowed down all at the same time and kind of regrouped. Yeah. And so we were able to kind of we actually did a Kids on Bikes run, which was a lot of fun. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's neat. I mean, Kids on Bikes is an amazing game. And I think that, for your kind of the parent role players out there, if you're a dad and you've played D&D growing up, like something like Kids on Bikes is a really cool way to try to bring the family into gaming.
Right.
And I think that a lot of retailers saw RPGs in particular spike during this year because families were willing to give it a try because they were at home together for so long. Right? That for the first time ever, they're like, okay, well, maybe we will try an RPG, because we've got time, and so I think it was fun.
And like you say, a lot of times those physical books, probably I bet you RPG players have bigger shelves of shame than board gamers because like I have way more RPG books than I will ever play. I guarantee you, but I love picking them up. I love reading through them and finding interesting systems or takes and different worlds. And, I doubt I'm alone in that by any means.
I mean, to me, it's almost a little bit, I think it's the equivalent for some people buying a lottery ticket. Like there's this vision of what will be, when I buy this RPG book.
Oh, I could totally play this.
how great this campaign is going to be with me and my buddies, even if all I do is read it by myself and think about how awesome it's going to be.
Yeah.
That has value, right? Especially in 2020, right?
Yeah.
It's an escapism that I don't get any other way, right? Yeah, to me it's deeper for me than like playing a video game or something like that, right? To me, like awesome. Reading an RPG book and dreaming about how cool it will be when I finally play it is really fun.
Cool. Awesome.
And like you said, I have a big shelf of shame.
Yeah.
But
the nice thing is
because
it usually contains beautiful artwork. You'll still pull it off the shelf, and it only takes up this much space as opposed to like that much space. So I don't feel nearly as bad.
Exactly. It's like, as long as you don't move, it's okay.
Yeah, they are heavy. There is no doubt. Awesome. Well, is there anything on the horizon, anything exciting that you'd like to tell anybody about before we wrap up here?
Oh, let's see. I always get in trouble with Sarah for like leaking something before Sarah is allowed to announce it for real. So let's see here. What
we can always beep it out. We can always beep it out if we need to.
I mean, I will say that we have another license from Sanrio that we're working on a game for, and if people want to be really clever, they can go see which comic books we publish and probably figure it out.
There you go.
How's that? That's a fair teaser.
I think that's a great teaser, and it drives people to Oni's website, which hey,
there you go.
That's marketing 101, right? Like so.
Yeah, they can go buy some exclusive comics for those very characters.
There you go. Awesome. Well, Steve, thank you so much for taking some time to chat with us today and letting us into your world. Like you kind of game store owner, designer, developer. Now you're VP of games. It's just like and an engineer to boot. So if I need a bridge built or a game about bridges, I know who to call, right? So this has been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks a bunch, Chris. It was great.
All right. So we'll see you next time. Be sure to check Steve out. You're going to be on the Oni Press panel, which should be coming up, or if not, you can catch it on replay. And we'll be around, and perhaps on Sunday night, we'll be there for the tournament, providing some color commentary. So check around Discord for that, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.